Same old game.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Oh, welcome to this podcast review for March 3rd, 2023. And I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm Ryan McQuaid.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome to our NHL trade deadline show. Oh, that's the other podcast.
That's
The other sports-themed podcast.
We don't need to talk about
the other sports podcast. Yeah,
the Pittsburgh Penguins at all. Don't do that.
At any rate, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Creed 3. And for the first time since doing this little format thing, it's not just Brendan and I. There's three of us on a review.
There's three of us on a review here. That's neat. That's cool.
I'm the referee, and y'all are the boxers.
I feel like it should be the other way around. JD and I rarely go fisticuffs on anything. I feel like we think so much alike that to have you as the referee would be the most polite battle ever.
Cool. Then I'm Jonathan Majors. Welcome to my career renaissance. It only makes sense. Jonathan Majors is from the Dallas area.
I think it only makes sense that if we're going to have three people on here and one of us is the referee, it should be Jay in my place. And then one against JD.
I don't know. I think I would then be the referee because if it's JD and Jay, then that would be a. That's usually how it's always going.
You might get slapped to the point that you don't even referee anymore. They're just going to go at it.
I mean, it goes back to the Madeline days. You know what I mean? Where like all our podcast listeners know about that. Where I was just sitting back, I was like, I'm going to go make dinner during the middle of this conversation.
For all of our listeners and, of course, new watchers out there, for context, go back through the archives on our website at InSessionFilm.com and listen to this review of Madeline's Madeline. You'll know what we're talking about.
Man,
2018, I believe that was.
2018, the cinematic masterpiece. We're the only one that bring it up. That movie does not exist without In Session Film literally giving it its due every single time we talk about our arguments over the years. Fun arguments, for sure. But
hey, Jay and I were on our best behavior when we talked about Soderbergh a few weeks ago.
That's true.
We did very well.
That's true. You guys did crack that soda pop together and share 2 straws. Maybe one.
You found a common ground, and I think that's what helped there.
Yeah, I still need to watch that movie. I'm kind of bad that I haven't seen it yet. But also I didn't have a screening in my area and I missed that. I missed Cocaine Bear. Cocaine? That's how you pronounce it, right?
A little cocaine.
Yeah. Cocaine. Yeah.
Also, I do want to point out that Brendan and I did Cocaine Bear this last week. Ryan and Jay did their first movie series review, kicking off Wong Kar-wai, and we talked more about Cocaine Bear than Ryan and Jay did. Ryan and Jay.
This is further proof.
Wong Kar-wai.
Further proof that Elizabeth Banks has more to say than Wong Kar-wai.
I just think that's cruel. Oh, we tried so many rabbit holes too on that show.
You did,
and I thought you would be really proud of that one, JD. To be fair, like literally 8 minutes in, we didn't say a single thing about that movie, and I was like,
"Yeah, I know."
Well, this is the format he wanted, so this is the format you're getting, folks.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I pointed out in our group text that the episode itself was only 39 seconds longer. However,
it's like 39, 38.
You make a great point. You guys didn't really start talking about Wong Kar-wai until about 8 minutes in. There were other rabbit holes kind of sprinkled through as well. Brendan and I talked about Cocaine Bear from the beginning, and the rabbit hole we did. Well,
I was going to say kind of.
Yeah. Well,
what we did talk about was in relation to the story that inspired Cocaine Bear. That's the difference. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we started out with a story that very much obviously tethers to Cocaine Bear. So, again, very appropriate, related. And then even when we got into the philosophy of slasher film, it was relating to Cocaine Bear and its formula inside that philosophy. So everything that we talked about was contained within a singular bubble. Ryan and Jay not so much. They're
Love how
all
we're-
over the place.
Love how we're starting off this Creed 3 review 5 minutes into
So-
clarifying the last couple episodes. But I will also say,
I know,
About rabbit
ironically.
holes.
Here we go.
I can't wait for LSD
Ryan's
Lion
fault.
to hit next fall. You know, LSD Lion from
Lion.
Universal. Like, just drugs and an animal. I think you can get
Heroin
away with
horses.
that. Yeah, heroin horses. Yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
You know,
Creed
set it at a
3.
rodeo. You know what I mean?
We're here to talk about a boxing movie. And, I had to go down this rabbit hole because Ryan is here, and it's exciting, and it's the first time it's not just
That's
me
true.
and Brendan. So
That's
it's
true.
nice.
I am still a part of this show. It may not seem like it when it's Sundays, but I'm just busy right now, guys. But I'll be
Ryan's
there.
always busy.
I'm too busy. I'm too busy for these shows, but not for
Whenever
this
you call
review.
me, I'll be there.
Yeah.
The moral of the story, though, is that we've kicked off the One Car Y series. And
you should really
you
go
should go
listen
check
to
it out. It was
As
a
tears
really
go
good
by.
review.
Good
So,
movie.
Yeah.
Good movie.
go
You
and check
watched it,
that
right,
out.
JD?
I did. Yeah,
it's good.
I'll give some thoughts on it on the main show this weekend if we can find some time.
Okay.
All
All right, look at him. Look at him holding his cards to his chest. Look at him. Look at that
Well,
guy.
I'm trying to preach what I'm yelling at you for. Like, we got to transition here to Creed
I
3.
just want to go for another minute and a half just to get to the 8-minute mark.
Oh god, I think the
Just
moral
get
here:
there.
Wong Kar Wai, good director,
Yeah.
gonna be a good series.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's a pretty controversial statement there, Brendan. But,
I'm full of them
Speaking
right
of directorial debuts,
now. Nice transition.
Creed 3,
oh,
directed by Michael B. Jordan, his
Yeah.
first time behind the camera. It, of course, stars Michael B. Jordan as well as Jonathan Majors, Tessa Thompson, and a bunch of others that come and go. If you're not familiar with Creed 3, Adonis has been thriving in both his career and family life, but when a childhood friend and former boxing prodigy resurfaces, the face-off is more than just a fight. All right, let's get further into this. We'll start with you, Ryan. What did you think about Creed 3?
did you say Face Off?
Yeah, that's what it says here.
Because I kind of would want to see a Face Off remake with Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan. That would be a pretty
I
good
would
movie.
be down for that. Yeah.
That would be pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Whoever owns that property,
Not even
They're
20
already
seconds
making
into
a
this.
face off too, if I'm not mistaken.
are they making a Face Off too?
I
They
don't
should.
know. I
They
wouldn't be
should.
surprised
And
if
it
they
should
would.
Face
start
Off
those
2,
two.
Back in the Habit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
The
Sure,
Heat
yeah, okay.
sequel will star these two. Yeah.
All right. I like it. That'd be I don't know how, and then like Cage comes back in. I've seen this before. Anyway,
Peach. I could eat a peach for hours.
I can even peach for hours, even the pit. Anyway,
All right.
beyond that,
Ryan.
let's talk Creed.
Creed 3.
So I think it's only right to say about our relationships to the Creed / Rocky franchise. We are massive sports fans here at the In Session Film Podcast. So that's these movies are kind of in our wheel bag. And the Rocky franchise is one that is fascinating because of the fact that like we grew up with it. I think our dads or our parents showed it to us like on a ton of times, and it was on TV a lot. These movies were on TV a lot. So the first one, obviously, Best Picture winner, one of the great sports movies of all time. It's kind of undeniable. Still don't think it should have won Best Picture. All the President's Men sitting right there. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's another show for another time.
Great lineup.
I was on that other show earlier
Yeah.
this last week.
yeah. Shameless plug. Love it.
There you go. There you go. And then Rocky 2, it's good. It's not great. It's good. I like it. It's not bad. It's kind of like doing the same thing as the first one. And then like the third one is really when it kicks into high gear and they start going like, we're going to throw everything at the wall and we're going to see what sticks. So they get like Mr. T and Hulk Hogan and like,
Thunder Lips.
and then like Creed and Rocky are getting together, and it's like the montage where they're like boyfriends on the beach. It's all this great stuff. Anyway, so like that movie's fun. Obviously, the best sequel in the Rocky franchise is Rocky 4. Anyone that says otherwise is like
It's Rocky 3. Rocky
no
3 rules.
Rocky 4 rules. He literally solved the U.S. And Soviet crisis, for God's sake.
Have you seen the director's cut?
I have not. I've been dying to watch it, and
I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
God, I really want to watch it.
Fascinating re-editing of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the robot still in it?
No, it's not.
Damn it. Well, that's a
I
star
know we're getting a
deduction
little
right
off
there.
topic here, but it's interesting to see how a director's cut really doesn't have much new footage, yet it feels like a completely different movie.
Well,
Like it feels more in line with the Creed films, emotionally speaking, which is really interesting. I'm not going to say it's better; it's just different.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like I don't know if you guys ever, and I'm not trying to get down this rabbit hole either, but if you guys watch the recut or the death of Michael Corleone coda for Godfather 3.
I have not seen that yet.
You guys watched that?
No,
I think
but
guys.
I can imagine that being a similar example.
It's a much better film, and it recontextualizes a lot of that movie and takes out a lot of unnecessary parts, like Sofia Coppola, and in that movie. Sorry, I love her as a director, but good God, is she bad in that movie? Anyway, so there's the whole movie gets recontextualized. So that probably so I might like it a lot more, Brendan, but that's still offer withstanding. The Creed 4, not Rocky 4 is fantastic. Then there's Rocky 5. We don't have to talk about it. And Rocky Balboa, pretty good movie, not bad, pretty good. Has this
legacy sequels in some ways.
I would say so. It's one of those sort of legacy sequels, and so gives Sly his credit. I remember my high school freshman science teacher thought this was like the greatest Rocky movie of all time, and I was just like, "Wow, calm down, old man." But it's a really emotional film, and it kind of gets brought back up in the chronology of things with Creed 2, right towards the end, which is great.
I will say this also about Rocky Balboa is that I think it's the best performance Burt Young has given in the entire franchise.
Yeah, he's really good in that movie.
Yeah,
and then there's Creed, which
phenomenal.
Fantastic. I mean, it slaps. It's one of the best quote unquote legacy sequel remakes, reboots, whatever you want to call it, in recent memories. Like I was seeing somebody like say on Letterboxd, or maybe it was on Twitter today. I can't time apps. They were like, these are the Mount Rushmore, and it had Creed, Blade Runner 2049, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
It's like, those are the 4. Take those to the bank. And then somebody mentioned Matrix Resurrection, as they should. And so like, those are the 5 of like, if you want to know the blueprint of a really great movie, most of them financially successful, but having longevity too in this sort of thing, especially Creed, because of the fact that it has spawned these 2 sequels now, has made Michael B. Jordan a household name, made Ryan Coogler such a big name that he's doing Black Panther movies exclusively, but he's still doing co-writing on these movies, which is great. And his relationship with Michael B. Jordan is very important to this. Yeah, but yeah, that movie is great. Should have been nominated for a ton of more Oscars. Stallone should have won the Oscar over Mark Rylance, and thank God Jason.
Mark Rylance in that movie, though. I don't know if he's better. I do really like him.
I like Mark Rylance as a person, but in that movie is a different story. Anyway, Creed 2.
Oh, okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Creed 2 was, I think, for all of us, a really big surprise.
That movie,
right? We were all very surprised because I think we were all kind of a little bit skeptical going into that. How is it going to capture the magic of the first Creed, which was also, I think, such a big surprise too. Because when they announced it, it was kind of like, when are they doing? This is what they're going to do? Even though we loved Fruitvale and Michael B. Jordan. And that movie was a big surprise. I mean, especially Dolph Lundgren, who's fantastic in that film. The whole Drago's storyline and sort of how it's like the better version of Iron Man 2 almost in a sense right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Creed 2 should become a quintessential Father's Day movie in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious with those themes, but it earns them in spades. It is
super
that movie
good.
Should not been as good as it was. It's great.
Yep. So you get to Creed 3. Geez, like shut up and get to your review. So you get to Creed 3. This movie, even more pressure on it because you've had these 2 films that have really done well, surprised us all here at In Session Film. We've all really loved those films and we've really kind of admired it. And then you have Michael B. Jordan sort of doing what Sylvester Stallone did, which is get behind the camera, really take this franchise, by the horns and really just kind of wrangle it. And then you get the idea that Rocky's not going to be a part of it, which I'm kind of okay with. I was from the beginning of it. I was kind of like, this is great because it's Creed's, it's Adonis' story. We finally just get him in it. And then they announced the man of the hour, the golden god, the conqueror himself, the guy that's in all of our magazine dreams, one of the last black men in San Francisco. I could keep going. He's the man from Lovecraft. Like, I can keep going all over his
Might
filmography.
just call him a major
Jonathan
talent.
goddamn Majors to be the villain, the foil. And I go, okay, what you got? So I was very excited about it. I went and saw it. Went and saw it at a press or at a promo screening with a bunch of people. Terrible experience.
Really?
Don't even get me started on that. It was very bad. But the movie, outside of festival movies, because I've seen some festival movies and some movies in advance, is the best release so far of the year. I really like this movie a lot.
Okay.
I think that, and now I have not seen Cocaine Bear and I have not seen Magic Mike, so I cannot comment on those. But of the things that have been released wide in a theater this year, this is really great. From the get-go, you really get that Michael B. Jordan understands the assignment, not just as an actor, because clearly he's great as Adonis Creed, but as a director. He is doing things with this camera that we have not seen in this franchise before. Mm-hmm. He's really he's really just upping the ante and saying, like, I can do this. And I can do this in a way that's interesting and different and unlike any boxing movie or any Rocky Creed movie we've seen before. And I think the fighting sequences are fantastic, but more importantly, the relationships. We talk about the relationships in these movies all the damn time. They are fantastic. They are the centerpiece of this movie. This movie got me twice in the feels, and I cried both times. I think my wife thinks I'm a wuss. Because I took her to it and she loved it. Everybody loved this movie. It's a ultimate crowd pleaser. It's something that we should be very thankful that we have one of these right now, that it's making a bunch of money, because it can be proven that even in the third installment, there's still new things to tell. There's a ton we're going to talk about. Yeah. I think that, in terms of what the movie is trying to say, the past, the representation in the film too, is an extraordinary thing, and it's very lived in. It's a very lived in, well-rounded world. And I just commend Ryan Coogler for coming back and co-writing the screenplay with Michael B. Jordan. But his direction really it's some of the best big budgeted debut directing we've seen in a long, long time. I know John Krasinski didn't necessarily have his debut as a director, but when he stepped up to the plate and did A Quiet Place in 2018, I was kind of surprised by it, because I was just like, this is like
M. Night Shyamalan doing The Sixth Sense. Most people forget about a movie like Wide Awake, but it's the movie that they take notice of that person.
Exactly. It feels a lot like that for this, but Jordan's first literal thing behind the camera is this movie. Yeah. And shooting on IMAX cameras is never easy, specifically for a boxing movie, the first time that's ever happened. That's really impressive. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is an absolute winner. We'll talk about it more. I'm going to shut up because Jay's going to kill me. So,
well, that's all the time we have for this
Thank
episode.
you very much.
Be sure
Good night, everyone. And rate, review, subscribe. Hit the like button down there. And if you're on...
see you guys next time.
Let's skip to the end. We'll summarize it here. Ryan likes this movie.
I like it. It's good.
But you're right. A lot of us, especially at our age, we grew up with the Rocky franchise, mostly because of our parents, especially our dads. It's definitely a dad movie. And I don't mean that as a negative. It's just the demographic that really gravitates.
This was on AMC all the time.
TNT, TBS, especially where I was growing up. And I live just outside Philly, so it's really within the zeitgeist of this.
Yeah, Rocky
setting.
Tattooed on your back. That's
Maybe.
really weird.
I have visited the statue before outside the museum, so I've seen all of that and everything. But yeah, as far as the franchise is concerned, I don't dislike any movie in this franchise, with the exception of maybe Rocky V, obviously, although there are things about that movie I at least appreciate. I like what that movie is trying to say narratively. I just don't think it says it very well.
Yeah, it's, on paper it sounds good, and then Sylvester Stallone was like, "What if we shot it?"
Well, yeah, there's more to talk about there. Yeah, but Rocky 2, I'm also a bit mixed on. I think there are some issues there, but yeah, I love Rocky 3. That's my favorite of the Rocky sequels specifically. And then Creed was way better than it should have. Creed 2 was a big surprise. No, I think the big thing that scared us about Creed 2 was the fact that it was being directed by a relatively unknown, Stephen Caple Jr. And when we see something like that, our first instinct is to assume director for hire and a passionless project. And that was not the case with Creed 2, even despite, the narrative kind of feeling like it could be that, given the fact that it is the return of the Dragos. That could have been a really silly movie, but it wasn't. It was an earnest movie about fathers and sons. And there are things about Creed 2 that I even like more than the first Creed. I think the first Creed's a better movie for sure, but Creed 2 is still one of the great ones, if you ask me, which is honestly why for quite a while Creed 3 was one of my most anticipated films for I don't even know how long, JD. Did this make my list twice when we did our top 5 most anticipated films of the year?
Yeah,
it got delayed a few times. I know it was meant to come out in November of last year and then got pushed to right now, this March in 2023.
Yeah.
I know you want to share your thoughts too on this film, JD. So I'll just say I like this movie, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit disappointed. There are a lot of things that I think this movie is doing really well, and a lot of it really does come down to Michael B. Jordan as a director. I think aesthetically speaking, this is the most interesting film in the entire franchise, and not just Creed, but even the Rocky films as well. This is perhaps the most impressionistic film in the franchise. Michael B. Jordan has made it clear that he's very influenced by anime, and he tried to tailor that into the boxing matches themselves. And there's almost a I want to use this word not as literally as people might think, but there is a bit of a cartoonishness to some of them without it feeling cartoony. Like there is still something very visceral and palpable about them. But the way he handles slow-mo, the way he incorporates trickery and sense of place and the way things change, it's almost dreamlike at times. And I found that really bold. I found that really daring. And I love that this film is now breaking away from the connection to Rocky himself. I don't want to talk about the whole politics of it with regard to producer Irwin Winkler and Sylvester Stallone and their relationship. I know that there are issues there, and I don't really know what stance I should take on that because I haven't.
That's the last 45 minutes of the show, Brendan. Don't get it.
We're not. I don't think we should get into that at all. Honestly.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, you're right. It's at this point, it's just a sad thing that we're seeing in life.
It seems so inconsistent as well, given previous statements that were made when this movie was first announced. So there are a lot of moving pieces there that I don't think are worth talking about. For me, it doesn't affect the quality of the movie. I think Rocky is not missed here, and I don't mean that as a negative, like we didn't need to see him.
We also got a good send off in 2. Like if you want to take it that level, true. I mean, his story essentially was done by the end of Creed 2.
Yeah,
so this needs to, for going forward, it needs to be Adonis's story.
Which is why, in some ways, even from a musicality standpoint, this one feels even a bit disconnected from the Creed films. Ludwig Göransson is not scoring this one either. It has a new musicality to it that I don't think is better, but the movie feels like its own thing. And I really like that it does. Really, my issues with it, there are 2 major issues I have with the movie. One of them I'm going to save for later as this conversation unfolds, but I do think the movie feels like it's edited within an inch of its life. There's something about the pacing here. I don't know if it's a script thing or if it's a pressing for time or something, but by the end, I felt like I still didn't really understand this relationship, the relationship between Dame and Adonis Creed. Something felt missing for me. I think the movie really works as a performative piece. If I'm being perfectly honest, out of all these performances, Felicia Rashad might be the MVP for me. I think she is fantastic here.
She's great.
But by the end, I felt like there was something missing. I felt like there were story beats that we weren't being told that could have connected the dots a bit more. This wouldn't surprise me if there were at least 30 to 40 minutes left on the cutting room floor. There was a pacing thing about it that left me at a bit of an arm's length with it emotionally, especially when compared to how successful I thought Creed and Creed 2 were. So I like the movie. I think as far as a third film in this franchise and what could have gone wrong, most of it still goes right. But I'm not in love with it in the way that I wish I was, especially given the fact that I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on Pretext since we've already covered the entirety of this franchise quite a bit.
JD, do you want to live commentate the first Rocky film right now?
Sure.
Okay. Act 1, scene. We open in Philadelphia.
I'll just say that I am a big fan of the franchise on the whole. Rocky Balboa might be my favorite of the sequels.
Wow.
Creed is great. Creed 2, I think, is underrated. It's very, very
I
good.
love that movie.
So I was anticipating this quite a bit. Maybe not as much as Brendan, but very much looking forward to it. I will say, though, I'm with Brendan. I like the film. I don't love it. But I do think Michael B. Jordan shows great promise as a director. This film has that classic signature of first-time director problems, particularly in terms of pacing, which is uneven at times. But there are some flourishes here that are truly great. That final match at the end is one of the best action sequences in the entire franchise, I think. The way he channels intimacy and conflict between Adonis and Damien is really clever and intuitive. And it's not just the camera work and movement of the fight, but the editing of it and how Jordan brings focus to the conflict is especially engrossing. I also think the dual training montage is quite good. Despite its blemishes, the film is never not compelling to me. Right. There's an energy here that's palpable. The performances are really good, to what Brendan is talking about. The camera work is sharp. There's plenty here to love about Jordan's direction. The script is really the biggest culprit, I think, as there's a lot to sift through in just 2 hours. And as a result, much of the story is rushed and a little too slight for me. However, I will say, and I'm sure we all had the same thought, I say sarcastically, this film is the Captain America Civil War of the Rocky Creed franchise. In the sense that the main antagonist of Captain America Civil War is not Zemo. No, Zemo is great.
Yeah,
He's
I know
awesome.
what word you're about to say. Yeah, and I'm with you on this. It's a thematic. It's a
to the listeners out there, help.
Look, this is going to make sense. Just bear with me for a moment. The main antagonist of Captain America Civil War is not Zemo. He's a great character. The true villain of that film is guilt and how it's channeled to create rivalry, which is exactly what's happening here in Creed 3. But instead of guilt, it's childhood trauma. Trauma is the real antagonist of this movie, or perhaps more broadly speaking, emotions that we bury deep inside without, ever really talking.
Emotional suppression.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
because it's not just Donnie and Damien. There's a through line with Bianca as well regarding her hearing and the true disappointment she's feeling, but not necessarily conveying. But the true crux of the film, what's really driving the actions of it, is the childhood trauma that defines and intoxicates both Adonis and Damien, and how it creates the facade of rivalry, even though they both really know the truth. They just don't know how to process it. The film,
they don't know how to face it. They don't know how to communicate that.
Exactly. Absolutely. The film might be a little fluctuating in places, getting from A to Z. I do think it's uneven.
Yeah.
But man, that idea I did really love here, especially in context of Jordan's direction and how he taps into that with the vitality that he does.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I think that for me, as I know you guys talked about sort of pacing. For me, this movie kind of, for 2 hours, it went by real quick and was kind of like there's just the perfect sort of vehicle for something like this, because I was expecting this to be kind of a little bit of a letdown and sort of a mess because of the fact that those two first Creed films feel like very much lightning in a bottle. So like they're playing with house money at this point. and you have another sort of what is essentially a first time director, taking over this franchise, even though Michael B. Jordan's very comfortable in it, so and Zach Balin, I believe, and I believe one of Ryan Coogler's siblings.
Keenan Coogler, I think it was.
Keenan Coogler, I believe it's like his brother, maybe.
Zach Balin being tied to the script here actually was one of the things that had me most excited because
of King Richard.
Well, while I wouldn't say that's a great script in regards to some of the best scripts of that year, I think that writing style it felt very well tailored to a film like this.
It was very well structured for that kind of
sort inspirational sports drama.
Exactly, it kind of fit that perfectly, and I think. For me here, I thought that it did work for the most part. I understood the motivations, obviously. I think what JD's talking about, that trauma of Dame and Adonis's relationship, and finding out, that there's still more stories still to tell within Dom. There's still all this unprocessed baggage that we have not fully 100% grabbed into, because we're dealing with a lot of other things in those other two Creed movies. We're talking about the legacy of his father, and then of course the man who killed his father. So you're dealing with a lot of that stuff, and of course his relationship to Rocky. We're not actually really getting into the person, I think, as much who is our protagonist, who is our central protagonist. And I think that the film does a great job of conveying that. And then of course having this character of Dame Anderson, played by Jonathan Majors, coming in here, having this familiar relationship, having those flashback sequences, and seeing what got them into this position, and having all this regret, this anger, this frustration, that's of course going to build up, and it has to build up into those climactic fight. It's part of sort of this Rocky, kind of template, this sort of underdog mentality. We know that. I think the only thing that kind of, and I agree with you, Brendan and JD, like the only one thing I think that's a little bit like kind of just something you have to take with the grain of salt, because I don't think this movie's perfect. I just think it's really, really good for what it is. And we haven't had a lot of great releases this year. So when I say this is the best release so far of the year, we're talking about like through the month of January and February.
March 3rd as we're
it's March 3rd.
The year's
we got
plenty of time. This is the best movie of the year. We got a best picture winner on our hands.
Yeah, I mean, because my other favorite films of the year have just not yet been released. You know what I mean? That I've seen, because I've seen them at festivals. Yeah. But I think the thing about it is, for me, is obviously the sort of turn that. And the twist, there's a little bit of a twist in here, and that to me,
you're stealing my thunder.
Yeah, and that to me is a little bit like, okay, all right, I know what you're doing here. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. But for me, there's still enough emotional resonance behind those decisions that ultimately, like, we were going to end there anyway. We were going to get there anyway. The way we got there is a little bit messy, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I think that beyond just the trauma between these two characters, seeing Adonis's home life, seeing what he's built, seeing what his legacy has become from these films, from where he started to where he is now, he's a promoter. He's become retired already, kind of almost like Rocky 3 in a sense. He's retired.
Yeah, there's some mirrors to Rocky 3 here in the formula.
Some domestication for sure. But what separates that movie from this one is the stuff with Amara, which I think is truly
she's a scene stealer. She is such a scene stealer.
Truly some of the best inclusions we've had in this franchise so far.
Mila Davis Kent, so good here.
She's so good, and the fact that Jordan as a director made the conscious decision of having this time lapse, because the last time when we saw Amara, she was a child, she was a baby, she was an infant. Now we see her, she's way older than what she was. And to see that the world around her has evolved, to see that the fact that everyone around her has, they've adapted to her, and then even when Dame comes into their lives, he has to adapt to it as well. There wasn't any sort of maliciousness around that character. There's more just the understanding of the idea of that Dom has to tackle these emotions, because it could very well harm his family, but especially it's going to harm somebody that's not going to fully 100% understand all of this, because there's someone that has to communicate on a literally on a daily basis to survive with their hands and through facial emotions and everything. And then there's all these beautiful sequences in this film. And I want to get this out real quick before we just get over to you guys. I wept at the training lesson that Adonis gives Amara.
Oh, that is so
in
sweet.
There.
That is so sweet.
It is, for me watching it, I was thinking about, okay, this is great, but and it's so perfect for the characters. This is kind of the sort of dad, a girl dad athlete that we don't ever get to see. And then I started thinking about the influence on this and the fact that Michael B. Jordan was a big Kobe Bryant fan, really knew him a lot. There's even I believe in one of the off shots on the wall, you see a Kobe Bryant jersey. And it was very much a homage and a send off to obviously Gianna and Kobe, who passed away, and using that to sort of tribute them in this movie in a way of saying that this is what could have been for that family, but definitely for these characters, this is the future here. I'm not saying that it's nodding towards like Amara is going to take over this franchise or whatnot, but it's showing that like he's in control of this part of his life more than when he's outside and doing everything else. Home seems to be the place that he's very much in control, especially with his daughter. And when his emotions start getting the best of him, that's when it starts to crumble, and she sees him, and obviously Bianca's very concerned about it. And then you have the stuff with his mom. It starts all crumbling for him, and I think by the middle, that's when the director and the performer meet together in the middle of the film, and they have fireworks. And I think that the movie, while formulaic at times, it really, once again, Michael B. Jordan's just too good in this movie to make it not good.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Can I speak to that real fast, because I know there's other parts of the screenplay we want to get to.
Yeah.
But that moment is really fascinating to me for a couple of reasons. It is endearing to see the father-daughter dynamic, but I also love this pulsating irony at the center of that scene, because what he is conveying to her there about this passion that he has, what has defined him his entire life, is that it's not about violence. It's not about being out of control and just swinging your arms left and right. It's about control, which he does not have in his home life. And so there's this incredible irony that what he's teaching her, what he knows to be true inside the ring, is something that he cannot comprehend outside the ring.
Yeah, I think more outside the ring. Yeah, well, I think it is,
which is fascinating to me, and it also kind of circles back to this juxtaposition between violence or boxing and the physicality involved, we'll say, and being vulnerable. And he doesn't know how to be vulnerable, and that's where he's losing control. So it's interesting to see him kind of have to break through those barriers to find that vulnerability and maintain that control outside the ring, which is completely antithetical to his approach inside the ring.
Oh yeah, no, but I might disagree a little bit, JD. I do think I wouldn't say he's out of control at home. I just think that he is comfortable more at home, I think, in his retirement. But when he's promoting, he's in the ring, or he's outside of the ring, even, or outside of the ring, when he's transitioning to his new life as sort of a manager, building a brand and everything, he's definitely out of control there. He doesn't have it all in control because he can't control it. Those are things he can't control. Obviously, he has sort of, he's transitioning to more of a home life because he's an athlete.
Yeah.
And we see that transition, and parts of it are not easy, like, doing the dinners and doing the parent teacher conferences, because obviously he's going to respond as a physical athlete. He's going to go.
Was really funny. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but the whole school sequence I thought was really funny.
Where he's just like, I don't get it. Like, why doesn't she just punch this kid in the face? You know what I mean? And like, why doesn't she? Like, what's the punishment for this kid? But it's those conversations he's having with Bianca, but it's only until Dame comes into the fold, comes into the house, comes into the gym, comes into the center of all this, is when he starts to fully 100% control, because it's all about you have it all under control on your own way, but then a roadblock or a sharp turn changes that, and that's what Dame is. And he's the sharpest turn because it's something that, like you were mentioning, JD, he has not tackled within himself at all. He's suppressed it, and then there's revelations, obviously, with like the letters and everything, and the relationship that has sort of spurned from Dame while he was in prison and everything. All those things then cause him to finally have to face those things that he's kept deep down and suppressed for such a long time. And that's where I think Michael B. Jordan shines. It's in the middle of this movie, or even like I would say 2/3 of the way into this movie, but right before the training montage. Obviously, when the turn is like, hey, we're going to see these ripped guys start, getting ready for their big fight and whatnot. But that's when we see Adonis, I think, really finally learn, not necessarily just the lesson, but learn what is important about control, and really, like you're saying, JD, understand what control really means, because you can have it for such a long amount of time, and you may think in your head that it is 100% you're in control, but when life throws you curveballs, it's how you answer those curveballs that really define a man. And it takes him a longer time because of the fact that he's fighting against really even that sort of that realization and that contemplation of even attempting to look at his flaws from his past.
Which is why childhood trauma is the real antagonist of this
correct.
film, because that is, to your point,
Yeah.
and to bring clarity to what I was saying earlier, I'm not saying he's out of control in the sense that he's a man on the loose and we have to tie him to a chair and take him to the hospital.
Again, that's to the 40 minutes that Brendan's talking about was cut, and I kind of want to see that.
Yeah, but even in those early scenes,
One Flew Over the Creed's Nest.
Yeah, I mean, there's conflict between him and his wife, but yeah, the real crux of that control and where things start to ruffle themselves is when Dame enters back into his life, and all of a sudden that trauma rises to the surface, and he loses it, which tethers back to that father-daughter moment and that irony I was talking about. So I was drawing a direct connection between those two.
No, I agree, because
I think we're agreeing, just kind of running around in circles.
No, we're agreeing because
different aspects.
Because
like.
JD, because you're right. Because when he fully loses control, he loses control where, not just in front of Bianca, but in front of Amara.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when he hits his lowest point. You know what I mean? And it's in front of the person. Really, honestly, it's in front of the person that matters the most. I mean, he loves his wife and he loves his daughter. I mean, and his mother and everybody. But his daughter, you really feel the connection in this film to that. It's more than just his daughter. That's really his legacy. Not this boxing ring, not this new fighter, not the belts, not the fame. She's his legacy.
Yeah.
And to destroy all that, or to sort of crumble under the pressure of all that in front of her, and also to kind of show her that, like, not show her that it's okay to be sensitive, or that it's okay to tackle these emotions and not to be the perfect vessel, for her all the time. And in fighting against that, it's quite the antithesis. And so of what you should do. And I think he learns that by the end. He learns it really hard, obviously, with characters leaving and in other situations. You have to get to a low point in order sometimes to really realize the solution to a problem. But I think he does. And again, Jordan is fantastic in those scenes.
He's great in all these movies, and I think he's really great here too. Must be hard as a director for this to try and channel all these great performances from everyone else alongside himself while doing.
Well, I heard that Michael B. Jordan had a lunch with Michael B. Jordan, and they really sat down together as a writer and director, and they really talked about
twins.
It was a mirror,
that's
just
the
like
to Twins I want to see right there. But I think, to speak to all of that just in a very brief and summarizing way, I think when this film deals in the familial and more of the domestic side of things, it's at its best.
Yeah.
I love the scenes with Amara. Even from a storytelling standpoint, I think one thing this film does pretty cleverly is the way it tries to introduce this friendship between Adonis and Damien. is it does it in one long extended flashback to intro to movie, which is not something you often see. In a lot of movies, they seem so pressed for time that they sprinkle the flashbacks in throughout, and I've always found that narrative trope frustrating.
I hate it.
Here it almost like it opens like a mini short film to set the scene, and I at least appreciate that, which is where simultaneously some of my disappointment lies, and maybe I'll get some major pushback here, but
pun intended.
Maybe
I didn't love Jonathan Majors in this.
Oh,
son of a bitch.
I don't know.
You better change before I say like, review, subscribe. That's just not nice.
I don't know if it's his performance or if it's the writing of where the character goes, or maybe what was left on the floor, because something you brought up, Brian, that I think this film really doesn't handle well is that midpoint twist, that twist of sorts. I thought that was really bad. And the reason why is it completely changes the persona of the character for me, because there's this deep lingering sadness and insecurity in Dame that we're introduced to, but without getting too into the weeds, and maybe I'm perceiving it wrong, I'd be willing to hear different sides of the conversation.
I might have one thing.
Okay,
I might have a couple things as well.
Okay,
but go, JD. But keep going, Brendan.
Yeah, because
Ryan opened this review talking for 35 minutes, so I'll try.
That's fair.
I need my point. I need my point. I need my time.
I'm telling you, a one-man show that I will do will sell out big time.
No, I'm curious to hear what other reasons you might have, Ryan. But there is one moment that I look to that might help justify that turn in terms of that twist from a plotting perspective. I do think that the film plants seeds that we're getting to this moment, so it wasn't quite as jarring, at least for me, than it might have been for you. But that's not really what saves or potentially saves this turn for me. It's more so in terms of character and also performance, where what we see between Dame and Adonis early on in the film, there's obviously a little bit of awkward tension there because they haven't seen each other in decades, in a really, really long time. But there is a cordial friendship that is struck there once they kind of, realize, who they are at this time. And of course, Dame is trying to get back into boxing, and and they have these scenes where you see Dame come over to his house, and there's the party sequence and all that sort of stuff. And in terms of the relationship, despite the request that Dame makes, and of course Donnie's taken aback by it a little bit, but that aside, there is a respect and a friendship that is there between the two. And then you get to the first fight that Dame has. And at the end of it, there's a moment where Dame calls to Donnie, and Donnie doesn't show him any sort of admiration whatsoever.
That he's seeking that validation. He's looking for that friendship, that rekindling to be reciprocated back to him. I in many ways, that fight sequence is my favorite fight in the movie for that exact reason.
Yeah, like that to me, it's still a little bit of a jarring turn. I do agree, but I can understand motive there, that you're trying to get back into this thing. You are best friends. They both say at one point in the film that they were essentially brothers growing up. They experienced this childhood trauma, which is at the core of this movie, as we've already talked about. They have that shared experience. So despite Dame being away from Donnie for a long time, they are able to reconnect in this really endearing way. They have this fight, and at the end of the fight, where Damien has achieved what he had set out to achieve as he's a little kid, and the first thing he does is he turns to his best friend, calls out for Donnie, and Donnie shows him absolutely no respect whatsoever.
But weren't keep going.
I was just going to say, obviously, and it's understandable from Donnie's perspective in the sense that he's, this fighter that's on the ground, and who knows what kind of dire situation this is. and he's wanting to take care. But at the same time, to show absolutely no love toward this childhood friend of yours, and maybe even taking it a step further, like actively ignoring him in that moment and showing him a little bit of disrespect, I can understand why Dame would have that sort of a reaction. Now, is it a little bit heightened when they finally come to a head there on the beach? Absolutely it is. And maybe it's a little bit jarring, but I can, from a character motive perspective, and maybe it's also performance, and where you and I will maybe just disagree on Jonathan Majors, because when he calls out to Donnie and Donnie doesn't give a flying rip about him winning that title there, I can see it in the disappointment on Jonathan Majors and Dame in that moment, that his friend does not care that he won. All Donnie cares about is the sky that's flying. He doesn't care about me at all. So I can understand why that flip would, which is why I think the dramatic part of it, as far as the reveal of, him and his buddy and like, I wish the script would have taken that out, because I don't think you need it.
Well, I think that's the thing that ruins it for me, because doesn't that imply that the machinations of that reveal were all occurring even before that boxing match, showcasing that? Because then all of a sudden that implies that what Dame is doing is all fake. That he's just trying to trick this man as a villain to get revenge on him. And then all of a sudden, I feel like when we get to that beach scene, I am now watching a completely new character. And that's my problem, because I feel like by the halfway point, all of a sudden now I'm being introduced to a Clubber Lang-like figure. Like, he's very mustache twirly villain by that point, and I feel like it's a complete reversal to the point that all of a sudden it's like a new character for me. And the machinations of that reveal, it made the sadness and the insecurity of Dame seem like it was all just a mask and a facade just to trick him. And that's my
look. And I'm with you in the sense that it's jarring that Dame is a different character in that moment. I do think you can explain it emotionally, given what just took place in the ring and all the reasons I just talked about.
And maybe this is why I have to give less of the blame to Jonathan Majors and more on the pacing.
On the script.
Because I think in order to get to that more heightened performance, there's nothing the movie does, I think, to earn that or justify that. I think it's way too sudden from a shifting standpoint.
Yeah, I disagree. And the reason why is because I everything that Brendan just said about him playing a mustache twirling villain, I felt that way before the reveal was even there.
Oh, I did not.
I did not think he was being sincere at all there. If you know anything,
I completely disagree.
I didn't feel he was
genuine sadness and genuine insecurity in those early minutes. Oh, man.
To me. He states clearly from their first interaction when they're eating, I want to be the champ. Nothing's changed from the time I've left to the time in which, I've gone out. I'm going to be the number one. And I don't care that you are the greatest boxer in the modern era. I don't care that you got this new guy. I don't care. You're going to make it happen. And he's gone into his house. And he's had his food, and he's drank his wine, and he's met his wife, and he's going to these parties and everything, and he's stirring the pot. He is stirring the pot the entire time.
Okay, then if there is consistency there, then maybe I'll just make it a subjective thing. I don't find that interesting. I find that very one-dimensional in that regard.
I don't, because of one, I think Majors has never played a character like that before. And I find it really interesting because it shows of this actor's, trajectory of his career to be able to play that sort of versatility. I think his performance is funny at times. It's really familiar with Michael B. Jordan. It is essentially, in my opinion, at times he is manipulating this man emotionally and knows how vulnerable he is because he knows him on the inside out. He knows who he really is. And in order to get Donnie to where the place that he has to be, he has to get broken. It's essentially this man has to get into that core of who he really is.
That turns the character into a plot point and less of a character to me.
Oh no, it's exactly a plot point, but it's also
which is not interesting to me.
Which he's also a great character. He's also great within the confines of this film too. Is that this is a guy that he's literally calling in as Donnie is trying to do about like his title fight.
Hated that scene.
On
Hated
Steven
that so much.
And he's literally just laughing at him, going like, "Dude."
That just
and
so
Donnie's like, "This isn't the way." I'm like, "Dude, I'm getting right into your head."
Maybe I fell for the trickery and what that character was trying to do from a conniving, agenda, and maybe that's more on me. But if that's the whole goal and that's the arc of the character, I find that way less interesting and more suffocating of what that relationship between Adonis and Dame was meant to be. Which is why I'm going to say it. I found him more compelling as Kang the Conqueror. I slightly did. Okay. and I think it's more.
Wow.
I think it's again, I love Jonathan Majors. I think he should have won the Oscar for The Last Black Man in San Francisco. I think that is one of the best performances from the entire decade, last decade specifically. And I do like I like the presence he brings here. I feel like there's an inconsistency in getting to that point. I think it must be more on the machinations of how that character is progressed narratively and cinematically than it is on Majors himself.
I do think the pacing is a problem. Like from a plotting perspective, things happen so fast that it's hard to keep up with the storytelling at times. It does sound like I'm in the middle of you two a little bit because I think Jonathan Majors is very good here. And from a writing perspective, there's much to Dame that I do appreciate, even if it's borderline derivative in the sense that much of the machinations of the character, the manipulation that you're talking about, Ryan, what is that rooted in? Well, one, it derives from this childhood moment where he's arrested when trying to stand up for his friend. His friend abandons him, doesn't hear from him for years. So when he gets out of jail, he's
not just years, JD. Decades. We're talking like 20 years.
20 years.
I think it was 18, I think he said.
18, 20
like
years. Yeah, I'm telling you this. That's the easiest plot I've ever seen to become a heavyweight champion. If it took that long, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't move hell or high water to manipulate somebody like that.
You mean it doesn't take being born from Apollo Creed?
Exactly. You can literally just be the friend of that was the son of Apollo Creed. You know what I mean?
Go to jail 20 years. You'll be
just saying.
Yeah.
Like
that might be a little bit trite from a writing perspective, but emotionally it makes sense. And Jonathan Majors, I think, taps into it in this really interesting way where, again, I could look past how derivative it is because I think Majors does ride that line where I feel like I'm in between you where I sense that he is maybe insincere in manipulating the situation, but he's also adding authenticity to it. It might be both, which is why I love the reveal at the end of his fight where he wins and he turns to Donnie and Donnie wants nothing to do with him. Like from an emotional perspective, there's complexity there that I do think is great. Now, is that undermined by the idea that he had plotted this whole thing in prison and it was
but it does
so false for me.
But it does, but JD, it does prove his point. It proves this character's point of exactly about what Adonis has done to him for the last 18 years.
Yeah, and
that scene on the ground is exactly why Dame is in the place and has the feelings he has, because you didn't abandon me just in the ring. You abandoned me for 18 years while I took the fall for you. Think about that. And you took my life. I was the number one prospect boxer in the area. I was supposed to be everything there. And so when he does knock out Felix and he's on the ground, he's in genuine shock that he's not in genuine shock that he got away with it, but he's in the moment of, I just became the champion. I told my friend I do this. And my friend yet again decided to choose the other path rather than come down this one with me. And so what's he supposed to be on that beach? Forgiving, pop him open a beer and shake his hand, he's going to be absolutely pissed.
Then make it. Then I think it needs to be more consistent. And maybe this is more on me. Maybe I just found way more intrigue in a potential villain that really believed and fought for that sense of sadness and that lost friendship that existed. Because by the time we get to that reveal, my thought was, oh, he doesn't give a shit about Adonis. He hates this guy. He always has hated him. It doesn't matter. Like
but
everything about it just
does
felt
come
fake.
from a place of sadness because
all the sadness was gone. But that reveal eliminated every sense of sadness for me.
I disagree because I think that sadness that there is also too, he becomes essentially a caricature. And he's not believing in it. And also people that are extremely jealous or have extreme vendetta or whatnot, they do this. We see this all the time where people say things in sports or they don't 100% believe in, but they've been wronged by somebody. So they go to the virtual extremes of saying this person is soft and a whiny baby. And, he's been handed everything from a silver spoon and now look at me and da-da-da-da-da. But then to be humbled at the end of this film, that is the ultimate thing where he realizes, no. I guess you did learn some stuff that wasn't just from me. That moment
felt unearned for me. It
really
did.
No, Brendan, that to me sat there. That's somebody that thinks that they did know you, and they put you in because this whole motivation is, I know this guy. That's like when you see somebody that's defending somebody in like the NBA and they're like, I know what this guy is. He's a bum and I can prove it because I can guard him. And they play really well against him one game. But then that person makes adjustments and then they come beat him 4 straight games. And that person's sitting at home on television going like, I guess I really didn't know who that person was.
You're talking about the locker room sequence specifically towards.
Yeah, that's what James' character is. He's essentially what every athlete has ever been, and this is even more to an emotional stake because it's a guy stewing in a cell for 18 years, going, I know exactly who that guy is because I taught him everything about him.
Then make this a sports movie primarily, which this one really isn't. I mean, boxing is very much secondary or even third in line with everything this movie's doing. So if that's the goal,
in line with
which is fine. I actually
really
love that idea, but I think if it wants to get to that point you're talking about there, Ryan, it really needed to focus more on the athleticism and the psychology of the athleticism, which it doesn't really do. And that's not a knock on the film. It's just I know if this review goes viral, I'm gonna get most attacked for my thoughts on this.
Well, I don't think you will.
I really wish it worked more for me, and I think it really just comes down more to the writing because I do love Majors as a performer. He is, and even I love watching him in interviews. He is such an interesting he's an interesting presence. He's very soft spoken.
He's unlike delicate, any movie star we have working right now. He reminds me a lot of like what you get with Adam Driver, where there's this sincerity that is around him, but there's this mysteriousness that involves him with them too.
I sense a little Harrison Ford.
A little bit of that too. Yeah. I mean, I was watching Harrison Ford do an interview on Colbert, but then also I think like the next night, like Majors was on and he had this energy that was unlike any other interviews that I saw. And I think, it was, but also too, he's got this emotionality around him too, because I watched him go and introduce Michael B. Jordan on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And there was a genuine bond between the two of these. They kept calling each other brothers by the end of this experience. Yeah. And I really strongly was watching it like literally 24 hours after I saw the film going, yeah, I felt that the entire way through this movie.
One thing, and that's one thing. I'll say this, and I'll let you chime in, JD. But one thing that might alleviate some of my frustrations with Creed 3 is if we see both of them returning Creed 4 in some way, and there is more of a dynamic. I mean, because one character we actually see a little bit of here is Drago. The son of Drago is in this movie for a brief moment. And while it's very minor, it's only really 2 scenes. One of them is during the training montage. Those moments between Drago and Creed are actually quite tender and quite sweet. I was very surprised by that. So
Brendan, what you're saying is you want to see Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan run on a beach together and into the water.
I want to see them go.
Which now Who doesn't want to see that, right?
Oh my God!
Can I,
Hey, it worked in Top Gun Maverick, so let's see more.
Hold my hand, indeed. You know what I mean?
I want to quickly circle back to the locker room scene because that scene does recontextualize a lot of this film for me, and it's why I choose to, look at this film through the prism of childhood trauma. Now, I do agree with you, Brendan, that getting from A to Z, it is contrived. It's a little manufactured. The pacing of the film is a problem. However, emotionally speaking, I do think there is a lot to this film that is very good despite that, those contrivances. That locker room scene at the end, I do think is really great because it gives credence to the idea, at least as it relates to childhood trauma, that it had created this facade of rivalry that I talked about in my opening thoughts, and that they both really knew. It was never about them being at odds with one another. They were fighting that trauma, which is why Jordan's visual intuitiveness of that final fight, I think, is so brilliant, because that kind of fight doesn't involve anyone else. It's just something they just needed to discover themselves. And I think there's truth to, or at least I agree with you, Ryan, that like Michael B. Jordan, he had to discover that vulnerability, which eventually comes with the moment when he loses control, ironically so, in front of his daughter. Then there's everything with his mother that heightens that all the more. And he's finally able to get to a place of humility where he can be vulnerable and then regain that control. And similarly for Dame, it comes at the end when he, is defeated in the ring. And so when they have that conversation at the end, I think you do sense, perhaps it's mostly in the performance and less so in the script, but I did sense that there was sincerity to Dame's vulnerabilities there, because what he tells him is, it was never, you were a kid. It wasn't about, like, he has the epiphany that this was never about revenge. It was never about fighting Donnie. It was 100% about him fighting that childhood trauma that he also did not know how to process. He thought that by channeling it through some sort of revenge that maybe he would find closure, but then he comes to realize that was never going to come when he wins the belt for the first time and Donnie wants nothing to do with him. So closure had to come through something else. Well, let's face Donnie. Maybe that'll be it. Well, it's not that either. Really what he was fighting was that childhood trauma, and both of them together, which is why making that an intimate moment, not this spectacle of entertainment, I think is really great. Like from a craft filmmaking perspective, is wonderful. So the machinations of getting there, I'm with you, Brendan. It is contrived, but emotionally and thematically, I'm more so on Ryan's side. I do think there's a through line there that is very good, that these performers take advantage of to make sense of it emotionally. So it's uneven. There's no doubt about it, but I don't think that it's ineffective. I did find it moving.
Maybe I'm just too distracted by those machinations then, because even that locker room sequence when I just saw the film earlier today, so I'm still very fresh on it. Some of this could change after we post this review, and then I have to go and eat my own words and change my tune.
We've all experienced that.
We've all experienced
We've all
that.
done that.
That's the joys of being a critic, is when you can admit you're wrong. That's actually one of my favorite things to do, honestly.
That
Okay,
was
James
me
Cameron fan.
I was just going to say, Papa Jim, let's go.
For any new
I
listeners,
love that
Ryan
so
was
much,
the most avid hater of James Cameron until he was.
What would Big Jim do with the Creed franchise?
I don't know.
Man, they're going to box underwater. That would be
But
great.
anyway, what I was going to say is in the moment. What I was going to say was in the moment, I couldn't help but think to myself when we got to that final locker room sequence that this really felt like it was supposed to be a longer scene, and maybe that's more with the pace. Yeah. And maybe I was just really sensing some of the choppiness of it, that some of those arcs and some of those emotional beats felt a little they're certainly there. I'm not disagreeing that the through line from a thematic sense is there, but I think where I'm feeling a little frustrated is that I thought it felt a little incomplete. It didn't quite get.
It does feel a little awkward, to be fair,
and it was a little rushed for sure. And that's why I maybe more than anything, it's less the script and it's more so Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan, because for one, I love the subtlety of the moment. Their performance, very internalized. It's very quiet. There's no music.
And to be fair, I still like this movie. Like I would give this a positive grade on Letterboxd and wherever else I throw ratings up for movies. So to say it this way is not like I'm trying to knock the movie or bring it down a massive peg. It is certainly far from the worst in this entire franchise. But if it weren't for those performances, I might have a lot more negatively to say on it, because there are at least a few nuances that these performances are good enough to elevate, it works a little bit more than maybe the script allows it to.
And the way Jonathan Majors delivers that line, it's not your fault. You were a kid. I think is so important to me. That singular moment recontextualized the whole movie because it draws parallels between the two characters as it relates to vulnerability and childhood trauma. Without it, I'm probably, honestly, as much as I like the film, I think I would be much lesser on it, because the thematic crux of the film and the emotions that come along with it are what I think elevate it beyond the manufacturing within the storytelling and how the script kind of undermines itself at times.
Yeah.
So that needed to come full circle for me to, I think, embrace the film the way that I have. You do get that more overtly with Donnie, of course. I mean, not just his daughter, but his mom, Bianca, that moment they have where he shares everything. And maybe you're not going to get as much of it with Dame here, because he's ultimately, the antagonist of this film, quote unquote. Maybe they should have prolonged that a little bit more, but I think Jonathan Majors gives credence to it. I think there's a true sincerity emotionally. He has a realization that it was never his friend that he was fighting. It really was that childhood trauma that they shared. I did feel that in that moment, even if it is slightly manufactured.
Okay.
Which is why, at the end of the day, this is, I think, quite easily the weakest of the three Creed films. But I
still a good movie.
Came around on it. Yeah, I still really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I'm looking at the entire, all 9 films in this franchise, it's certainly better than Rocky V. I like it better than Rocky II. It's probably sitting around number 6 or 7 out of the 9 for me. But to be
fair, do my
I
ranking on Letterboxd. I haven't done that one.
I think the first Creed is my favorite of them all. Honestly,
better than the first Rocky.
Yeah, there are 4 movies of all 9 that I actually think are great, and that's the first Creed, the first Rocky, then Rocky 3, and then Creed 2. Rocky 4 is, it's great. It might as well be called Rocky MTV. But I respect that film so much more as being like this cultural, like historical landmark of the 1980s.
That montage sequence too. Like the training montage sequence, that's like the greatest thing.
What training montage? The whole, there's like 17 training montages in that movie.
Hell yeah, Brennan.
The soundtrack for that movie does rock.
It rips. It rips.
Great. Yeah.
It's as ripped as Sylvester Stallone's arms. Ayo.
Yeah.
Final thoughts? You guys have any final thoughts on Creed 3?
I do want to mention something. We briefly mentioned it earlier, but I do want to get into just a little bit of, and maybe get your guys' thoughts on it too. But I think another strong point of this movie too is Adonis's relationship with his mother, and
like
Felicia
I said, I think
Felicia Rashad's performance is so good. She provides good comedic bits, but this was the second time I cried during the film. Was
that could have been so, in many ways it kind of is a little cheap, But I mean, the cheapness.
It's a little
doesn't necess-
hammy, but
Well,
you know.
but this is proof that just because something's a little emotionally manipulative and cheap doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
We've earned I think we've earned that moment though throughout these films and everything with Adonis.
It is the one moment that I think does a really good job sort of calling back to the Rocky franchise specifically without literally calling back to the Rocky franchise. It does so in a very heartbreaking way. I feel like we spoiled some of this movie already based on the conversation we had, but this is the one moment I don't want to give away. I want to leave this.
It's a real beautiful moment. It didn't have me thinking at the conclusion of it, where was Rocky for him? Because it's so because those two characters had interactions in the last two films, and so and everything. But that was the only time in the film where I'm like, hey, Rock, maybe you should show up for this. It's kind of important. But anyway, I know that. But
point. I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
I mean, it's kind of a big deal. Like when you do something, when you do stuff like that in a movie, and then they're not there, it's like. Yeah, that's the one time where I sat there and I was like... Will
they address that in Rocky IV? Okay, this is going to be a really odd trajectory that I'm going to go on, but remember the American Pie franchise, and then when they did American Reunion, the way that they wrote Chris Klein's absence from American Wedding, he just shows up and says, I missed your wedding, I wasn't going to miss this.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like... it's like, are they going to do something like that in Creed 4?
Hey, man, I was sorry. I couldn't close the restaurant that one day, you know what I mean?
And it's just like, yeah, it'd be something really silly and dumb, and then we'll come back here and we'll be like, see, he was busy. He had customers that day. What can I tell you? You know what I mean? Yeah. Travel from Philadelphia to Los Angeles is really a lot on the Balboa family. Look,
to be fair, he's been away from his son for a long time.
Listen,
and doesn't his son live in Vancouver now? So
yeah, something like that.
Isn't that closer to LA than Philadelphia?
That's the other thing too about this franchise. I know we did this long review and everything. I know we got kind of on our guard and defense. This at the end of it, this is a really dumb franchise at times. Like it's written primarily by a meathead. You know what I mean? Like that's literally punches meat. So like I think we could all give it a little bit of grace in that as well too when we think about it. But obviously
at the same time, like come on,
they've
Ryan,
elevated
if we're gonna
themselves.
think through this logically, I have to retract my own statement a little bit because they fast forward in time. They jump like 7 or 8 years. So it's like
that was the one thing. It's like that was just. I mean, that was a little disappointing. I mean, shoot, God, I hope he's still alive. But
maybe that's the answer.
They just kind of skip over the whole pandemic and everything. You know what I mean?
Well, then the rants against Aaron Winkler are not going to end if that's the case.
But no, it was. I mean, jumping forward in time is always a dangerous thing. I mean, literally, we just kind of missed the prime of Adonis throughout this movie.
They just fast forward.
We just fast forward through it. But like at the same
of all time, that's all they tell us.
But like, you know what? If we're gonna get then all the stuff with Amara, then I think that it's got to be worth the time jump, and I think that really is worth it. You know what I mean? So especially for the story, and so. And yeah, we haven't really mentioned her a lot. We've mentioned her character a lot, but once again, Tessa Thompson is just absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, she's really great.
She's just so comfortable in this role, and her chemistry with Michael B. Jordan is insane. They should be in every goddamn movie together. It's kind of annoying that they're not taking over Hollywood in every damn movie. I think that I do agree with you, Brendan. I think like. The one problem this movie does have is like a lack of like almost like a real sense of like an Adonis theme when they're in the ring, and that they never really established that, to be fair. JD, you're more of the score guy, so you might know that more than I do about that. But like the callback at the end of this movie is to the original theme when Rocky loses or wins in the ring. And it's subtle when you hear it, but it's also like, it's like, guys, if you want to have do his own thing, you kind of need to have Adonis's own theme. Like that's like the beauty of all the legacy. That's the beauty of like a lot of Lego sequels, right? It's like all those characters. Like you think of Rey's theme in like Star Wars, for example, right?
Yeah,
it's so distinctive for that character specifically.
And
that you kind of like, that's the one thing that's missing from it.
Yeah, and I love the new themes that Ludwig Göransson created for Creed and then Creed 2. And if this one is trying to have its own new musical identity, I think that's a fine thing. You know, I mean, John Williams has done that many times with the Star Wars universe, just on its own terms. You talked about Rey's theme. That's a great theme taken in a vacuum, but it still feels iconic to Star Wars.
Yep.
I don't think composer Joseph Shirley here is up to the challenge.
Surely you must be joking.
Oh,
sorry.
Don't
I had
dare
to
call me Shirley.
sorry.
Well, and maybe this is
didn't-
also a Michael
mean
B.
to.
Jordan first-time director thing as well.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
That's,
knowing
you know.
what to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
the
it's
musical score
like-
here is purely functional. It's more about
Yeah.
for filling in the dramatic beats than it is about creating its own new theme to characterize the film.
Because there's a lot of soundtrack music in this film.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like Michael B. Jordan is more interested in utilizing that to bring energy than score,
Yeah.
which might make sense.
The sound
given
work
his
in the film's
sensibilities and-
Yeah, the sound work in the film's fantastic. I mean, like it's those boxing sequences. I mean, they're so, you know, I know that everybody's now like being like, you should do a Dragon Ball Z movie. It's like, no, I'm like, let Michael B. Jordan do whatever the hell he wants, but like for
Yeah,
his
I
next movie, but like,
I'm guessing
he's
his next movie is going to be Creed 4, but that's
He's got like the good bone. Well, I hope not. Like how he's got the good bones here to kind of branch out and do his own thing. You know what I mean? Like,
maybe directing wise, it won't be Creed 4. I know he
you
said
know.
that Creed 4 is for sure happening, but I mean that could just be an early press. You know,
I mean, it's
interview
making
something
like
I didn't do.
$45-50 million this weekend. It's going to happen for sure. But like also too, at the same token though, I hear, you know, King Dynasty needs a director probably. So, you know, maybe he just reteams with Major and does that. There you go.
Just steps into Marvel.
Boom, I just solved your problem, MCU. Get Michael B. Jordan back on the game. It's a household product.
King Dynasty, I thought King Dynasty had Destin Cretton.
Is it Dustin Cretton? Oh, okay.
Star Wars doesn't have a director yet.
There you go. Secret Wars. Yeah, that's right. There you go. There you go.
Well, I'd still like to see Michael B. Jordan, dip his toes into some small material.
Brendan, I'm totally kidding.
I know.
Michael B.
MCU.
Jordan should direct Fantastic Four and reprise his role as
Fan
the
Four
Human
Stick.
Torch.
I would
Fan
not
Force
be
Stick.
opposed to that, honestly.
That cast, okay, I know we're not going down a rabbit hole here, but that cast was pretty good. It's the material that they were given that was
Oh yeah, that was
garbage.
A train wreck of a movie.
That's objectively a great cast. Like that is like, I mean, for performer, even Toby Kebbell as your Doctor Doom. Like those are really good casting. You know?
Fan Four Stick, which I'm always going to call it that.
Yep,
I
Fan
think
Four
the first
Stick.
half. The first half of that movie, I don't think is terrible. It falls off the rails in the second half. But anyway, yeah, that's
Not a
beside
movie
the
to
point.
put people in jail for.
No,
except
I
the
don't think
people
it's-
behind the scenes that deserve to be in jail.
Oh,
if you know what I mean.
Now we're down a rabbit hole. Let's get back to Creed 3. I am interested to see this one again to see if I'm able to adjust any reservations I have on it, because it does rank around the 6th or 7th place spot of the 9 films in this franchise right now. But I will say, for a third film in a franchise like this, that really isn't. I mean, these movies are marketed and presented as big movies because of the cast involved and the legacy behind it, but they're kind of small movies. And this is arguably the smallest of all of the Creed films. Even it still carries the urban grime, I guess, of the first two. It has this sort of raw palpability. It doesn't have the flashiness of a Rocky 3 or a Rocky 4, which I think a lot of people feared that it might, or that this pivot franchise might, but it doesn't. It still feels very of a piece with the first two Creed films, and I like that it is getting well received. The critics seem to be really liking it. So if that means we'll get more in this franchise, I'm excited to see that. If this one didn't fully land with me as much as I would have liked, it doesn't matter as much. I still like the movie, and I'm still glad it exists as it does.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what Michael B. Jordan does next. I think he shows some really interesting promise as a director. It might be a little inconsistent from narratives and pacing standpoint, but some of those fight sequences are very inventive. You don't see that kind of confidence as successfully when it comes to first-time directors. He's really confident in that regard, and I like that about it.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about this film and Michael B. Jordan's direction is that, yes, the pacing and editing is a little bit dodgy at times, but once we settle into the scene, I think he does so many interesting things, whether it be the action beats or even some of the small, quieter moments. I think is really great. We talked about that father-daughter dynamic early on, that moment where he loses control. I love the close-up on himself, maybe being a little egotistical there, but it's okay because he's
earned it by this point.
He looks good. All right.
But that close up on him as he has this realization that he just screwed up, I think is really wonderful. So like the quieter moments here, I do think are staged and composed very well. And then there's the last action beat that we've talked about and the clever inventiveness of that whole sequence. So as a director, the storytelling and editing is something he'll have to improve on. To be fair to him, and something you said earlier, Brendan, we don't know what was on the editing room floor. Perhaps executives were telling him, hey, we got to cut this down to 2 hours. And unfortunately, there's just a lot they had to remove. And so it does feel disjointed when we, in terms of getting from A to B to C. And things do happen really quickly, right? Like we're introduced to Dame, and then 5 minutes later he's in a fight. It's like, whoa, that happened real fast. And then we're fighting again, like not that long afterwards. So it's like, that is contrived. But I think in terms of, okay, let's put all that to the periphery and let's just focus on these characters. I think he does some great stuff there. Really, I think this comes down to an editing and scripting thing. It just is a little too manufactured, but from scene to scene, I think there's a lot that is going on here that I really do like. This is my least favorite of the Creed films, but I still enjoyed it. I would still recommend it, especially if you're a fan of this franchise.
And I will say, people in my theater really dug it. My parents went to see it on their own, and they loved it. So it's working for a lot of people alongside critics. I went with my fiance Maris, and she was shadow boxing in her seat while watching it. So it's working for people. It really is.
Yeah. Can I just say two last things real quick, JD?
Okay.
If that's okay. Just two observations I made when I was watching the film. Does not render any hindrance on my grade of Creed 3. I just want to note that when I was watching the film, I was really struck it struck me. Sorry, strucken's not a word. That's a very Texas thing to say. It was strucken by. What struck me was when Dame and Donnie they have these conversations in his basement. That's the weirdest looking pool table I've ever seen in my life. It's just the construction of it is marveling to me. I kind of want a documentary about or a featurette on the DVD about how the hell they just selected that. And second of all, the last thing I want to mention here is that introductory diner scene between Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan. I just want to also reiterate, not all Texans do what he did with that Tabasco sauce, which looked like an absolute crime against humanity. Just taking a whole bottle of Tabasco sauce and putting it all over that steak. I don't know how his eyes.
Why though?
I don't know how. I mean, sure, but I don't know how his eyes weren't burning by the end of it, or his taste buds weren't destroyed.
That's called editing. Yeah.
If you love steak, that's not how you eat it.
No, I mean it was very much like De Niro and the ketchup in Goodfellas.
Gave a good reason. He gave a good reason for it.
You're not wrong.
He did, but just my eyes were like, "That's a really good looking steak. What are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like it was just. It's again, it's the nitpicks that I see in a movie that don't hinder anything. Just funny observations by Ryan.
Made me hungry for steak. I'll tell you that.
Man, I could go for a ribeye. Mm-hmm.
I'm a New York guy. Medium. Oh,
rare. You're a New York strip guy?
Yeah.
Medium what?
Medium rare.
Medium rare. Okay, that's correct. At least I'll give you that. Yeah. Anybody that goes well done can get the hell out of here. Like, this is ridiculous.
No, I'm not. Yeah.
You might as well dip it in ketchup while you're at it, or a massive amount of Tabasco sauce.
There you go. There you go. Maybe it was well done.
We never heard the order.
It did look red. To be fair, it did look red.
It looked kind of red. I would say that steak looked at least medium rare. That did not look well done.
All right.
JD's so angry
at me. Everyone listening to this, go enjoy your steaks tonight, because we all know that's what you're eating.
In session cooking has officially
Cook
begun.
the steak. Don't put them on your eye because you got into a fight. There you go. Ayo.
At any rate, let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our takes. You can email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. Follow us on social media. If you're mad at Brendan, that's at Brendan J. Cassidy. You can go and yell at him.
Thanks, Katie.
That's
sure
Instagram,
to-
Twitter, and 4chan.
Be sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like. That really helps us out, especially since we're relatively new to the YouTube game. Of course, leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, however you are listening to us, and sessionfilm.com. Go and check it out. We have some great written content that's up there as well. I'm sure there'll be a written review. Ryan, is there a written review for this coming soon? Is there one up there now?
Yeah, there'll be one. There's always reviews at InSessionFilm.com.
Okay. Well, there you
Just
go.
look for reviews and you'll find them. They're under a rock, or maybe they've been gone for 18 years, but they'll be there.
Yeah,
Sure.
all right. Well, be sure to go and check all that out again. InSessionFilm.com. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Jonathan Majors, he's good. Real good.
Hot mama.